we're going to solve trigonometric equations by factorising. This is on page 121 on the Delta textbook. If you remember that when we do quadratics, what we do is we make the equation equal to 0, solve for each factor, and get two solutions. Now, what we have here often on the right is that we have a sum. If the sum is equal to 0, then we can factorise. And if we factorise, we should be able to solve each of the brackets. So the key to solving these ones is that if you have a sum, change it to a product equals 0, and then you should be able to find some solutions. Same thing goes with trigonometric equations. So if we get something like this, we notice that on the left-hand side that we've got sine squared and sine. It is already equal to 0, so that's a thumbs up. And we're trying to solve for x's between 0 and 360 degrees. What you notice is that there's a common factor. If the common factor here is sine of x, then you can just take the sine of x out of the bracket. So you get this. If that's the case, then if it's because they're factors, the factor of sine of x equals 0, and the bracket, which is the other factor, can be equal to 0 for it to multiply to give you 0. So what we do is we solve each of these. This one here requires a little bit of solving, but this one here we need to rearrange first. So minusing 1 from both sides, then dividing by 2, we get sine of x equals negative 1/2. But remember, there's two solutions. Sine of x is equal to 0, or sine of x equals negative 1/2, which we'll deal with in a second. If you don't like being able to factorise like this, you could make it a little bit more straightforward for yourself. If you let a equal the sine of x, then you would have this. If that's the case, you can factorise it. As I said, some people find this a little easier. So a will equal 0, or 2a plus 1 will equal 0. Each of the parts factors equal 0, which means when you solve it, you get a is 0, or a equals negative 1/2. If that's the case, a is sine, so sine of x equals 0, or the sine of x equals negative 1/2, which is what we have here on the right. Let's deal with that. Sine of x equals 0 and sine of x equals negative 1/2. We have to solve them separately. Solving this one here on the left, which is sine of x equals 0, this is the sine curve. We want to know where it's equal to 0. So you can see it's going to be 0, 100, and 360 over the 360 degrees. So there are three answers, 0, 180, 360. If we deal with the right-hand side, we've got sine of x equals negative 1/2. I'm going to do it off a graph. So here's my sine curve between 0 and 360. We want to make it equal to negative 1/2. There's my line there. There are two solutions, 210 and 330, which means we have 5 solutions altogether. So we put them all together and generally we write them in numerical order.